I'm delighted to have here in this panel session three people who participated today in the workshop. We've got David Brown from BriteBill, we've got Stephen from UPC, and we've got Alan Coleman from BriteBill as well, CEO of BriteBill. Stephen, in your most recent presentation, you talked a little bit about what you've been trying to achieve. Perhaps you could just recap on the motivators, the key reasons why you thought that it was important to look at bill presentation.
Sure.
And in what ways it's fundamental to the business?
I think for us, the biggest issue was the fact that customers found the older bill we had very confusing, couldn't understand the details of our bundles and our prices, particularly around changes in prorates. So also customers want to make sure that they're on their most up-to-date bundle. So understanding what exactly is in their pack, how much is that being charged, are they getting all the correct discounts, etc., for coming to us with the bundle. So they were the two biggest use cases we had.
And David, in your presentation, you talked a little bit about how design values, and Stephen has alluded to some of those design values in terms of what UPC has been trying to achieve, but why do you think it's so fundamentally important to embrace design in something, as a lot of people might say, as mundane as the bill?
Well, I certainly think that bills are viewed as very mundane and boring documents that no one really wants to engage with. But bill design is particularly important because exactly the nature of those documents means that they've often been formulated based on IT requirements, based on system constraints, or based, on a traditional model of billing as revenue collection. So within all of that, there's very little consideration for the customer. And these days, in the competitive market we're in, the customer is more important than ever. And being able to communicate to the customer as an individual and say something to them that they find relevant and useful and informative is very important in establishing a relationship and establishing some trust between the provider and the customer.
That trust word is an interesting one, and also a number of the speakers today alluded to the fact that by giving the customer greater information, maybe greater granularity of information and information that's much more personal to them as individuals, there's an opportunity perhaps for the customer to jump to a different tariff or a different bundle, which might result in a decline even in revenue. Is there a downside to all of this? How does the operator assure that they maintain revenue?
Well, that is certainly a consideration, because transparency, which is a word that you'll hear a lot in terms of what is good design, it's making the information very transparent and very understandable. Now, in terms of business, there may be some aspects within an organization where making something more transparent is not the direction the business necessarily wants to go. But there's a lot of decisions to be made about what the priorities are and how operators can use design. So I don't think it's a case of necessarily making things clearer and more upfront through design across the board without consideration for what the customer wants and what the potential pitfalls of that are. So for instance, we looked at some examples of communicating around prorate. Now, lots of customers are confused about prorate, and if there is a single prorate period, then yes, definitely that should be messaged to the customer and it will help them understand that. If, however, there are multiple prorate periods within one billing period, there is a level of complexity you reach where design alone or anything else is not necessarily going to help if the underlying information is just so complicated. So there does need to be a line that's taken there.
Alan, particularly in that point of revenue assurance and the role that bill presentation has to play, and Stephen, be curious to get your comments on this as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's true to say that you can be as transparent as you want, and if you're very transparent, you clearly could create a situation where the customer can make a choice that ultimately reduces the revenue you collect. So I think it's a journey you take the customer on. You as a business go on and you go on that journey with your customer, and you take things step by step. And you try to do things that ultimately create longevity in that relationship and trust in that relationship and allow you to sell more and do more with that customer over a longer period of time. All businesses have an inflection point where they have to look at something in a medium to long term in order to invest for a sustainable future, rather than constantly managing, to the next quarter. Mm-hmm. This is just another case of that. It's the same way that operators would decide 3 years ago to invest in infrastructure to roll out 4G or the next wave of technology. They don't do it for a quarter return. They take a longer view on the sustainability of their base, the profitability of their base, the number of services they want to sell to that base into the future, mm-hmm. and then they work on that basis. And that is just the reality of the journey you have to go on.
Stephen, Alan alluded to the fact that it's not just about tactical revenue assurance, but it's also about the long-term customer relationship. First of all, do you agree with that?
I do, yes. I mean, for UPC, it's really about the strategy of having the best products in the marketplace at the best price, and having a customer experience that really backs up those commitments to our customers. So for us, we constantly change our products and we innovate our services. So we expect and plan and tactically understand the customers will rebundle again and again with us, mm-hmm. so that they can stay current and have the best, best broadband speeds, the best packages, the best value in the market. So we're aware of this, and it is part of our long-term strategy to increase customer lifetime value. Everybody wants to be on the best products. Mm-hmm. And for our UPC, we believe we have them, and that if we stay ahead from a product perspective, then customers will continuously rebundle with us, but stay with us.
There was when we presented some of the research data that BriteBill commissioned, where there was this dichotomy between what the operators were trying to achieve from a billing and presentation point of view, and the difficulties with internal systems, and the customer almost perceiving that there was a degree of indifference to the relationship on the part of the operator, which is sort of manifest itself through those difficulty with systems. Do you think there's an opportunity to sort of create a paradigm shift through greater personalization and involvement with the customer?
Well, I kind of alluded to that earlier, that the experience we had before and after our BriteBill presentation, where we transformed our bill presentation layer and the format of our bill, was that for us we weren't really able to do that. We weren't able to have a personalized dialogue with the customer. And since last November, where we've changed our bill presentation, we found that we can not alone personalize messages to the specific customer if they're brand new or their first bill, if there's a change bill, if they're coming up to their contract, etc. But we can also make sure we explain and have transparency that you mentioned, David, on our products and services. So explain exactly what is involved in our bundle, what they're getting monthly, and what their usage is and where their discounts are, because it's very hard to understand that. You mentioned the complexity, and for us, we've tried to take that complexity out of the bill. And partnering with BriteBill, we've been able to achieve that. We've been able to achieve, hopefully, a simplicity that customers can, use the bill for what it is, which is explaining the products and services they've bought and pay the service, but also to get a sense of the usage and are they on the right fit for the right tariff and the right package.
I think one thing to consider is that, we talk about billing today in the context of the portfolio of services that are on offer today. But if you reflect 5 years ago as to what was on offer then from many of the operators in the marketplace, it pales in significance in terms of the complexity. Now the question is, what's going to happen in 5 years' time? What sort of things will be billed for? What will be the dynamic in that build relationship? And would the flexibility you have in your billing systems today be fit for purpose for what you can pretty much bet is going to come in 5 years' time? So, for example, 5 years ago, social media was in its infancy, and some of the technologies that we take today as completely ubiquitous around smartphones and everything else, weren't there. Mm-hmm. And if you look at the life cycle of infrastructure in operators generally, it's generally longer than 5 years. Mm. So now, as you decide or you're making decisions on the appropriate infrastructure, it definitely has to have a perspective on what's coming and what could come. So. Yeah,
and brings us to my next question relating to Future is from a UP. I know you don't want to disclose too much to your competitors, but in a forum like this, but could you perhaps hint at, Alan mentioned social, for example. Sure. Could you maybe hint at some of the things we might see emerging in terms of new standards of customer service?
Well, for us, we've been in the social arena for quite a long time. We've partnered with our other companies under Liberty Global across Europe, and we believe we have a lot of best practice there. We see that the trend is that customers really want to engage with their product themselves that they use, their broadband, their telephone or their television experience, and try to overlay social into that. So we see it from a customer service channel, of course, but we also see it from an entertainment perspective, what we're doing online and what we're doing on social, and also trying to create a kind of a constant dialogue with our email flow to our customers on a regular basis about our new services and products. So really, to hint on the future, it is more personalization, it is more relevancy to how they use our service, and how we can transfer that into really being the best in the market. For us, it is about about our products. It is also about that we have the best value in the market, and finally that we deliver and can back up the customer experience. So we are giving an awful lot to our customer to try to engage with them in multiple ways. We've launched our new Horizon service, which is a set-top box, but it's a gateway as well. So it allows you to create a home network and allow that multi-device experience in your home, which I think is very modern and will hopefully future-proof us around usability and connectivity. So we allow our customers to discover. And second of all, I think for us it's about really trying to migrate our customers to use online services. Now, online services, thinking digitally, it's not just your web, it's your apps, it's your TV and your social. So for us, it is about really engaging the digital world and thinking digital.
Okay. David, can you perhaps hint what's coming next for BriteBill? What's exciting you from a design and an opportunity point of view within the
Well, I think from a design point of view, certainly the area of responsive design is particularly current at the moment. As we've looked at today, the billing information that needs to be communicated is extremely complex. So there's a very satisfying design challenge there in how to take that amount of information and simplify it and optimize it for various channels, but also in a very efficient and usable way. So traditionally at the moment, responsive design is a relatively new concept, although common out in the marketplace. It's not necessarily being applied to such information-rich arenas. So I think that challenge from a design perspective is particularly satisfying if you are a designer.
Well, I think one thing I think we'll start to see is a more infographic-led kind of billing, where the visualization of that data becomes more compelling. Because I think it comes back to this idea of you need to draw the customer's attention to the bill and by extension to the relationship. And only by dragging their attention towards it can you engage around other items and cross-sell and provide better care. And I think we currently have a view of billing which is somewhat linear. You owe me this much stuff. So I think two dynamics. One, real-time billing, where you are not billing on a cycle which is a day in a month. I think that the billing cycle will shift into more dynamic chunks. And I think that the billing element will turn from being a kind of auditable, it will still be an auditable list of what services you took and how much you owe. But I think overlaying that will be a dashboard of reports and cuts and slices of that data. So for example, it's a very rich pool of data. You effectively have a footprint of that customer's most important social network, because the people they call, the relationships you have where you call somebody or you engage with somebody are typically the people you engage with most at a most deep level. Mm-hmm. So if you could map those numbers to names, then you're into kind of a social network of understanding that social dynamic. And that's a very interesting, rich pool of data to represent for customers. And if you can do that in an interesting way, you'll build up that rapport, build up that engagement, and you can then deliver more services.
Okay. And just my final question for each of you, based on what you've heard from today, and I think we've all learned a lot from the collection of speakers that we have had, well, any final comments or thoughts based on what you've heard? I'm looking at you, David, but I'll ask you first, Alan.
So I think the most interesting thing we heard today was that link between trust and customers, trust and transparency of tariffs, and their willingness then to go further in the relationship and take more services from that provider. So effectively, if we can't establish a communication around the tariffs and services today in a way that's open and that the customer understands and is happy with, it makes it much more difficult to go and sell them additional services, which in their mind adds additional complexity to what they don't understand. Yeah. So
I think I'd follow on that theme that what I learned today is that customers who are less likely to understand how the bill is either formed or the charges within the bill, within a bundle as an example, are probably less likely to buy new services, less likely to engage in different formats with you, and less likely in theory to trust you. So for me, it's about how really understanding that customer profile to engage the customer more and better and richer data. And I think the second point was that it's not that just one size bill fits all, is that there could be another type of bill that you can send the customer at a different touch point, different journey along the life cycle. So that's something that's quite interesting to consider, that we could possibly tailor and personalize our bills a little bit more in our life cycle. So I'm very interested in personalization because I think it is how you restore the trust and you really build that individual one-to-one relationship that you try to foster for a lifetime. So I think that's something I took away from today.
Okay, great. David?
Well, I think the degree of commonality in what we heard today was particularly interesting for me. So, I spend a lot of time talking about these themes, but rarely do I have so many other people from different viewpoints and disciplines also talking about the same issue. So whether you look at the situation from a kind of research and analyst perspective, whether you're looking at it from a sort of end user and design perspective, whether you're looking at it from a business and technology perspective, what we see is that there is broad agreement from consumers, from operators and from everyone that bills are not really performing adequately currently for the number of reasons we've all discussed in the sessions today. But I think that broad agreement is the first step towards improving the situation. And for a long time the status quo has existed based on the constraints, but there is a clear desire to improve things for consumers, and that's an exciting place to be.
Listen, thank you all very much. It's been a fascinating day and a fascinating discussion. I'd like the audience to express their appreciation for our panel.